Hello all, and welcome to Breaking on the Daily, where today we have the Trump tax scandal resurfacing itself from the grave after it turned out to be nothing, and it's still nothing. The New York Times released a revelation that an international businessman had international bank accounts, one of which, the one that is the primary recipient of coverage from this story, being his Chinese bank account. A Chinese bank account that, if you read farther into the story, you know hasn't been used since 2015. This story's a nothing. I mean, that's the thumbnail of the video, that's the title. It is nothing. This is a nothing story. There is... They say, oh, he paid $100,000 or so in taxes to China, and they say, well, he didn't pay income taxes in America for 11 of the 15 years before he went into office. Of course, based on how the Times considers paying taxes, that being liabilities, not the actual taxes paid, that sort of distinction is meaningless, especially considering that he paid $40 million in taxes, or $38 million, dollars in taxes in 2005, as we learned from the Rachel Maddow story from 2017. These stories, I think they're a cover for the Biden story, especially since the narrative for it has disintegrated even more than it had on Monday, because now we have, from the New York Post, alright, before we get to that, from the New York Post, Joe Biden has been railing against anyone who even wants to look into this story. So he decided to rail against a GOP Senator Ron Johnson, for saying that there should be an investigation into the Biden story. And it's amazing what he says here, because he says blatantly false things. He says things like, well, most of the intelligence community believes that this is Russian disinformation. Of course, all of this is just proven by our next story, that being the FBI and DOJ, on top of the DNI just a few days ago, have now said that the laptop is legit, that it does nothing to do with Russian disinformation. And apparently the FBI has been investigating this since November 2019. And I get why it would take that long for anything to get done. I mean, I'm sure there's more to this than the laptop. That's what this says to me. This says that the laptop was just the beginning and that they're, going through it. Either that or they're going through it very slowly, on purpose. We'll see. I personally am of the belief that they were just gathering more evidence. Because this is the Trump FBI. This isn't the Obama FBI. If it was the Obama FBI, I totally believe that. But this is probably being run from the top down, essentially. I'm sure that Trump's getting updates on this, and has been getting updates on this pretty much since November of 2019. And that's what a lot of this has been... That's what I've seen a lot, or what I think of it. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense that the FBI, this got sent to the top apparently immediately, and that it would just be stonewalled by the Trump administration, because Trump must have known about this since 2019. That pretty much confirms it to me. So I'm fairly certain that the FBI has been investigating, and have been seriously investigating, and I'm sure there's more than just the laptop. That's the thing. That's what this says to me. Despite what a lot of conservatives are saying, well, they've been stonewalling it. I just think that investigations take a long time. That's just the nature of governance. That's the nature of bureaucracy. And that's what that is. Yeah, and to add insult to injury, we have now a photo, once again from the New York Post, a photo showing Joe Biden meeting with Hunter's alleged business partner. But he never talked about his overseas dealings with him. It never happened. He just met with his partner. We just have photos of these things. It's just this story is unavoidable. This story, it's a shame though. It's a shame because people are going to blame this story for Biden losing, and I don't think that's the case. I think Trump has been up pretty much the entire time. I don't think Biden ever really stood a chance. But you have the same thing with the Clinton story, where Clinton was up 5, 6, no, even more. She was up like 10, 12 nationally in mid-October, and people blame her poll drops on the email story. How Comey came out and reopened the investigation like 2 weeks before the. I think it was 4 weeks before the election. It wasn't that long before the election, but people blame her poll drops on that. Like, the American people care deeply about that sort of thing, and I think to a certain extent that is the case. But I don't think that's what swung the election the way it did, and I don't think it will swing the election that way this time. I think that Trump was just ahead, and that the polls were lying, because it doesn't even really line up. It's complicated, but the polls, they didn't match up then. They aren't matching up now, because if Biden was collapsing, he would have collapsed not a few days ago, when he has started collapsing in certain polls, but not in others. 538 still has him up crazy amounts. Don't trust them. It's just crazy. But he still hasn't. We still haven't gotten to the point where it's within margin of error in every single polling. And if that was the case, it would be. If this story was killing him, then it already would be by this point, I think, at least. Because we have a pretty big example of the Streisand effect, even though the media, the social media particularly, have been stonewalling this story. It has gone crazy. It's gone everywhere. Everyone knows about this story. It's not something that's unknown at all. Very much the Streisand effect. Very much. But anyway, on to the next story. We have the Trump administration sending a warning to 2 major labor unions. And I don't think this is really going to go anywhere, honestly. I mean, a lot of these warnings don't end up materializing in a lot of cases. I mean, they're accusing them of embezzlement and all these sorts of things. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but it's something to at least look at. The labor, to read from the Daily Caller, quote, the Trump administration sent letters to the presidents of 2 major international labor unions warning that their organizations are disproportionately subject to embezzlement. Now, and we go on, just, explaining which foundations labor unions we're talking about. We're talking about the United Steelworkers Union and the American Federation of Government Employees. And this is very rare, but I don't think this is really going to go anywhere, honestly. It's still worth looking at, and I think you should, keep your eyes on this story. That's what we're here to do. We're here to, notice where you should be looking, It's not about conclusions, it's about where you're looking, That's what this show is about. Now, next on to some COVID-19 news and some good news. So, this is from NPR. Studies are now pointing to a big drop in COVID-19 death rates. Now, I could have told you this weeks ago. Reason being is that I did a data analysis in private. I did a data analysis of the COVID death rate over the months. And the crazy thing I found there, and I'm going to put this in the description. I'm going to put a link to the spreadsheet I have. And I don't want to... So what I found was that in April and May, the death rate was more than double what it ended up being throughout the last few months, ever since June. Ever since June, it went down. It's crazy. It was up at like 5-6%. And now, to be clear, this is based on tests. This isn't based on pure cases, which is why you're seeing like, it's a 0.1 for 0.1% overall. That's a measure of all potential cases, all people who have antibodies. This is just positive tests, so it's not including every single case, just to be clear. So it was up at like 5-6% based on positive tests. And then in June, it absolutely plummeted down to 1%. It was crazy. And it actually lines up pretty well with lockdowns and when lockdowns started going away, which is very interesting. And also another thing is, I wouldn't put much weight on that because, that's early on in the pandemic and you have a lot. I wouldn't put as much weight on that if the March numbers weren't what they are. Because April and May were super high. But here's the thing. March is more similar to June than it is to April and May. And you could go look at this. I'm going to put this down in the description. It's very interesting. And I think it's another thing to look at. And these studies aren't the same thing. What they're showing is within hospitals, death rates have gone down precipitously. And this is probably due to therapeutics. Therapeutics are getting very good. They are much better than they were. I mean, lockdowns are essentially inarguable at this point. I think they were inarguable the entire time because they're an unproven nonsense theory. But besides the point, they're even more inarguable because, well, if you get the disease, even if you're in a risk group, your death rate is still going down. And it's going down all the time because therapeutics are much, much better than they were in April and May. We're not talking about April and May numbers now, which is why you might see in even the states that have huge case spikes, on top of the fact that you're getting a lot more young people because a lot more young people are going and getting tests because there's more tests available, you also have a greater level of therapeutics that are lessening the death rate, even among people who are vulnerable. So the whole COVID narrative is slowly falling apart. I've said this for a while, and it's just going to keep doing this. It's just going to keep happening this way. And man, you're just going to have to wait and see, I guess, for the end of this, because I think it's coming soon. Even if Trump wins, I think it's coming pretty soon down the pike here, because on top of that, a lot of states that are continuing to lock down, like New York and California, are actually collapsing currently. Like, there was another story I saw. This isn't in the. This is more informal, where I think it was upwards of 60% of a 60% more unemployment there is in blue states than there is in red states, and that's really bad. That's really bad because red states at this point are essentially down to normal numbers, whereas the blue states are up at crazy percents. But anyway, on to our next story, and this is a Riot update. We have 2 people being beaten down over a Trump 2020 flag, and this is in Oklahoma. Man, it's in Bricktown, Oklahoma. And this is from Coco 5 News. It's a local outlet. But these political attacks are just getting crazy. And I talked about yesterday the China story being the most worrying story I've seen all year, and this is getting a bit worrying with the political attacks. It's getting a bit insane, and I don't know what's going to happen after the election, especially if Trump wins, and I think he has a very high chance of actually winning. It worries me. I'm not personally affected by it because the city I live in is very, very conservative and, hasn't had any riots, really. I mean, we had a Black Lives Matter protest probably May 26th, 27th. I forget when. It was a long time ago. Nothing really happened. They blocked the city street, and that was annoying because I was working at the time, and when I had to go home, it was I had to take a huge detour, which was annoying. So, it didn't exactly endear me to them, but, only minor inconvenience, not something huge. And, this is just, it's getting to the point of being depressing. This is, the third story this week of people being beaten over their political affiliations. I mean, you also have the story of people being sent letters threatening their houses if Trump doesn't concede the election because they're Trump supporters. Man, it's just getting insane. But on to more lighthearted and stupid news. And this is our last story of the day. AOC decided to debut on Twitch with one of the largest viewer streams. She played Among Us and just, man, I hate this crap. I'm of the opinion that if you don't know things about a subject, you really shouldn't talk about it all that much. You really need to think out your opinions on things before talking about them. I say this about video game people all the time, where a lot of people who are into video games and do video game type content don't really think about politics all that often, but have their kind of defaults. And if that's you, I don't think that you should talk about politics, at least not publicly. And you really shouldn't vote either, because you might be. This isn't like oh I don't want to hear you talk about it. No, it's like if you talk about politics when you're stupid, you look like or not when you're stupid, when you don't know things about politics and you talk about politics, you end up looking stupid. Reason being that anyone on either side of the argument can easily poke holes in your arguments. And this goes for both sides. I didn't really like when JonTron got involved in politics either. I think he did not argue his points very well, and those are points I more generally agree with than And then you see from people like Pokimane or any other more leftist game commentator. You just see this kind of stuff too often, and it goes vice versa. I don't want to see politicians playing video games most of the time. I barely want to see political commentators playing video games unless they're good, unless they are involved in video games and have these sorts of connections. People like Razorfist, those types of things. I don't like these two areas mixing, especially when it's with people who don't know what they're talking about or don't really care about it. And this story is just stupid. I'm not outraged about it. I'm not outraged about AOC debuting on Twitch. I don't care. She debuted with people like Hassan Piker, which avowed socialist, said America deserved 9/11. Hassan Piker's done a lot of crazy crap that I don't agree with, but it's just dumb. AOC herself is of a similar caliber to Hassan Piker, in my opinion. But that's just it's just a dumb story. Anyway, I think that's all. I'm out.